Hey, my name is Rowan, I'm 20 and I grew up in Townsville. Living in Townsville wasn't always the best of places to live. You always hear of the movies and in the stories how people live in the big houses with the big families, with all the neighbors and friends, but I grew up with just my mum, my dad and myself, and we were a lot closer. I never, had many friends in the neighborhood or anything like that, so it was really just all about family. And, growing up I was only 1, 2 or 3, so by the end of that, or throughout those years, I always thought we were so close and so tight, but apparently that wasn't the case in my family. By the time I was 3, things started to feel a bit different. I was getting older, we stopped going to places as a family together, and, growing up in a very close family, I thought this was different. And by the age of 4, both of my parents were divorced. After living alone for 2 years with just my mum and myself, she finally found someone and they moved in together, and I was only 5 years old. And in that family, the new husband had 6 kids. And to me, this was a massive shock because I came from a family with just myself. So I thought this would be turns for the worst thing ever to happen to me. But that was the complete opposite. Right after they got together, they got married, we moved in together. So that was 8 people living under one roof for the next 5 years of my life. And I thought this was going to be the worst thing ever. Brady Bunch type of material going on here, but it was absolutely the best. So I had 5 other siblings, all step, half, that type of relation. I have a younger sister, Michaela, she is 20 years old. I have another older 2 sisters, Kelsey and Melissa, who are 30 and 27. And then I have 2 older brothers, Lewis and Josh, who are 26 and 28. We all had our own rooms. We all meshed together really well. I don't know how, but it worked well. And it was something that I would never take back. I'd never take for granted because it was very close. We were very close. We did a lot more things with our neighbors, friends, and communities as a family. So it was one thing that turned for the better and not the worst.
So the first question is what I consider to be the most successful and the most problematic aspect of my submitted work. I consider the most successful aspect of my work to be my editing style, due to the circumstances I faced. Whilst I was filming the interview, the sun began to set and it affected my shots as now different takes had different lighting. Shadowing was off and I didn't notice until once I had filmed everything. This was the most problematic aspect of my work, as I either should have considered filming at an earlier time of day, or in a perfect world, I should have retaken the shots in a consistent lighting and not natural light. However, this wasn't possible to do as my interviewee was only available for a limited amount of time, so I didn't get the chance to refilm on another day. Although, this problem feeds into my most successful aspect of my work, as it forced me to pay a lot of attention to the detail of my editing. I had to adjust each shot individually, and I also created a coloring and shade template to cover all of the shots as well, messing around with the lighting and making sure it overall looks nice to the viewer. Thus, I'm very proud of the effort I put into my editing and how I transformed the original shots to their final products. So just to reiterate, I think my most successful aspect was my editing style, and the most problematic aspect was the time of day I decided to film, so the lighting of each shot. The next question is one key learning discovery I made in terms of the creative possibilities of producing interview portraits. A key learning discovery I made during this project was the importance of different shots. I was encouraged to think of creative ways to produce the interview. By having unique B-rolls, like a different perspective to the original shot while the interviewee is still answering their question, or creative cutaways to involve photos and different segments relevant to their answer, it really adds to the final product. It was a fun learning experience to see what worked and what didn't. For example, I had to exclude some of my B-rolls that I originally filmed whilst I was editing, as they didn't suit the interview. This led me to filming more shots that were more relevant to either the specific shot itself or the answer from the interviewee. This learning discovery relates to Michael Rabiger and his discoveries in directing the documentary. As he states, cutting between different shots can create a good chance of abbreviation. It helps break up the interview and creates a more interesting story. overall creating an engaging product compared to the one single shot of the interviewee answering the questions. It was a really fun learning process, and it required a lot of time from me to consider what worked and what didn't, as I had to go back and film more puns once I could compare them to the original shot. And it really shows how much B-rolls can influence the story and the final product. And finally, the last question is one core lesson I learned in the production process that might be relevant to my broader development as a media practitioner and why I think it matters. I think a core lesson I've learned during the production process that is relevant to my broader development as a media practitioner is ensuring the person I'm interviewing is comfortable and confident. In my experience during this process, I could feel my interviewee being a bit nervous about, firstly, being filmed in front of a camera, secondly, having to answer unknown questions, and thirdly, not being sure what the final product would look like. If I had prior experience, I would have been able to address these concerns with a solid plan and outline so that they would feel more comfortable and confident during the interview. By making sure they feel comfortable and confident, the interviewee would be able to answer my questions easily. The conversation would bounce and it would appear more natural in the final product. These factors are very important to consider, as in my experience, when you feel unsure of how to support them, it can not only create a lengthier process to which their nerves can heighten the longer they're being filmed, but it can also affect how they answer and how they present themselves. Therefore, if I create a plan to make my interviewee more confident in the future and ways to help them and explain the interview process, it will make them better in front of a camera and help my career as a media practitioner, as I now know what to expect and can apply solutions to the problems I've once faced in the past.